Welcome, everyone. I am MongoSlade. This is Three Count Commentaries, and today we're going to be looking at an article written by a wrestling historian by the name of Ian Douglas. It discusses the number of black Hall of Famers in the various different wrestling halls of fame. This is a very interesting article. Now, the reason why there's so few black wrestlers in the halls of fame, of course, they give you that answer, and that is racism in the past. So that's the too long distance listen version. But there's still some really meaty stuff going on in here that I actually want to discuss. So let's get into the various percentages of blacks that have been inducted into the various halls of fame. I'm going to give you all the numbers first, and then we're going to break them down by individual institution. All right. So WWE 12.9, the Cauliflower Alley Club 3.7, the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame 3.3, the Luthez George Tragos Hall of Fame, also known as the TNT Hall of Fame, 2.5%, and the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, 2.1%. Ian Douglas tells us that all of these are actual percentages as of March 2024. Now, WWE has more than 6 times the blacks in the Hall of Fame as the Wrestling Observer Newsletter. But they also attack WWE's Hall of Fame as illegitimate and that it is artificially boosted by, quote, perceived silliness, such as having one wrestler having been inducted twice, like Booker T, which, they say it's happened multiple times, but sometimes wrestlers get inducted twice. They also talk about celebrity honorees like Mike Tyson, William Perry, the Refrigerator, for those of you who don't know who are too young, Snoop Dogg, and Mr. T being in the Hall of Fame. The celebrity wing, where you have guys like Pistol Pez Watley and Brickhouse Brown. They said that WWE has no actual physical Hall of Fame and there's no voters. It's just all the whims of Vince McMahon, and it's not a legitimate Hall of Fame in any traditional sense. So the 12.9%, you could just chuck it in the bin. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. And then we move on to the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. All right, so this is a Hall of Fame and it's a museum. It was founded in 2019 as a 501c3, so it's a nonprofit organization. It says of 52 wrestlers that have been inducted into their Hall of Fame, only 2 have been black. Bobo Brazil and Reginald Sweet Daddy Siki, both in 2023. He says that they are going to focus more on wrestlers pre-1950, and that is, quote, a young institution, and that eventually they'll catch up to have more blacks in the Hall of Fame. I don't go after them too much. I mean, I understand. It was just a couple of years ago. All right, so the George Tragos Luthez Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame was founded in 1999. It has only 2.5% of its inductees have been black. Of 87 wrestlers inducted, only 1 is black. His name is Luther Lindsay. Jonathan Snowden, who was interviewed for this article, mentions that for this Hall of Fame, it says fame is not always a consideration. Ellipses, perceived ability to shoot and wrestle, ellipses, of a significant concern. Now, ellipses, for those of you who don't know, means that I'm cutting out things. So I'm not putting out his full statement. I am shortening it. I'm giving you a summary. So only 1 in the legitimate shooter Hall of Fame is actually black. Very interesting. The Cauliflower Alley Club, which a lot of people have heard of, was founded in 1967. I'm not entirely sure when they began their Hall of Fame element, because it started out as a fraternity. So, but of the 300 individuals since 2000, they started at 2000. They didn't go all the way back to the beginning. So they started at 2000. Of the 300 wrestlers that have been honored in the Cauliflower Alley Club since 2000, only 11 have been black. Since Brian Blair of the Killer Bees took over in 2010, 13% of the honorees have been black. And they make a note that Brian Blair specifically looks at that as something that he saw to improve when he took over in 2010, which gives you the idea that it's perhaps a quota system that he has, because 13%, well, blacks are 13% of the population. Whenever you hear that, well, there's 13% of the population, so they should be 13% of, like, if it's 10%, it should be 10%. I don't know. But it's just a weird thing that I noticed. All right, so the Wrestling Observer newsletter, dead last, 2.1% of all the people that have ever been voted into the Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame have been black. It was founded in 1996. Ian Douglas says, quote, "This closely mirrors that of major spectator sports by having a panel of writers, historians, veteran wrestlers, etc. Of the 280 individuals that have been given Hall of Fame status by the Wrestling Observer newsletter, only 6 have been black. Abdullah the Butcher, Bobo Brazil, Ernie Ladd, Bearcat Wright, Carlos Colon, and The Rock." Carlos Colon, by the way. All right. So they, of course, mention that The Rock and Carlos Colon are both mixed, and says that the Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame heavily skews towards Mexico and Japan, and he gives a very good, logical reason. There are multiple wrestling promotions in Mexico. They have their own scene. Japan has its own scene. Of course, you have more opportunities for Japanese and Mexican wrestlers because Japan and Mexico have their own separate territories, as opposed to the United States, which is a multicultural nation. Therefore, black people are diluted with whites and Asians and Samoans, etc. Right? All right, that's sensible. Now, when it comes to the Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame, we're told that blacks often fared poorly relative to the work rate test. This is what Ian Douglas says. So Jonathan Snowden says work rate replaces realism as a key factor in the Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame. And then he continues by saying that one of the key things is wrestling in Japan. And then they go even further by saying to us that only 5 wrestlers have ever gotten, 5 black wrestlers, let me be correct, have ever gotten 5-star matches from Dave Meltzer. Keith Lee, Ricky Starks, Ricochet, the Velveteen Dream, and Butch Reed. Only 5 black wrestlers have ever had a 5-star match, according to Dave Meltzer. He also says that the Wrestling Observer newsletter has 0 black wrestlers before 1950, and only 1 black pro wrestler since the 1970s, who is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. They blame this on the death of the territories and saying that blacks have had fewer opportunities as the territories died away, and opportunities, of course, shrunk. So then he gives us a treatise on championships, as some people think that championships are how you decide who should be in the Hall of Fame. And he says since the 1980s and the death of the territories, there was only 1 black champion, well, 2 black champions in the entire 1980s when it comes to the WWF, the NWA, and the AWA. Those champions were Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson. 1983 becoming the tag team champions. Now, for the WWF specifically, after Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas lost the championships, there would not be black champions of any kind until Men on a Mission in 1994, when they won the tag team titles for 2 days in England. And then there would not be a singles black champion in WWF until 1996 with Ahmed Johnson. Now, he gives some lip service to Virgil winning the $1 Million Championship in like 1991. That is not a regularly recognized title, so I don't give it that much credit. But the storyline also pushed that thing to new heights, and it was tremendous. But you don't really count that. Now, in terms of the NWA, Doom, Ron Simmons, and Butch Reed won the tag team championships, the NWA tag team championships in 1990. Of course, the NWA was under WCW at this point. Ron Simmons will become the world champion in 1992, and there will be no other major singles championships by black wrestlers until Booker T won the United States Championship in 1997 and the world title in 2001. So he says basically, blacks have not had the appropriate opportunities to, if you consider championships to be a prerequisite. And then we're told that the sins of the past and denying blacks a platform is why you don't see a lot of black Hall of Famers, or you don't see a lot of people really calling for black Hall of Famers. And then we're gonna pause right here because there is some really interesting bits in this. Now, he gets into things that I really, really don't care about later. And we'll still talk about them because you might not want to read this article yourself. But this is a very interesting bit that I want to discuss. So there's a wrestling historian named Oliver Bateman who was interviewed for this article. He says, and I quote, "Wrestling, by controlling competition, really prevented anything resembling a level working field. If the promoter actually tells you that you cannot use your athleticism to wow fans with work rate masterpieces, that you, despite being an Olympic bronze medalist in judo, have to work a punch and kick ghetto blaster style like Alan Coage did in WWE, you are essentially stuck below an unbreakable cement ceiling. You can't become an all-time great because they won't let you. It's not in the script." This is the kind of stuff that really raised my eyebrow. Because when you talk about Bad News Allen, he worked in WWF for 2 years. 2. You have an extensive history of Alan Coage wrestling in Japan that you could have taken into account if you wanted to put him into the Hall of Fame. He worked in Japan. You could have put him in the Hall of Fame for his Japanese work if it was that great. You can't just say, well, they made him do punches and kicks in the WWF. What are you talking about? He had an extensive history in Japan. You're a wrestling historian. You should know this, bruh. Right? That's the kind of stuff that really I was like, what the hell? I know everybody, the guy is a tremendous athlete. He's a tremendous athlete. But you're telling me that we should reduce his career to the 2 years he spent in the WWF and all the years he spent in Japan don't count? They don't matter. How about another one? I got another one for you. Bob Sapp. Nobody talks about Bob Sapp, who was one of the top stars of New Japan Pro Wrestling. And Wrestling Observer Newsletter, by the way, focused tremendously on Japan. There have been non-Japanese wrestlers who have gotten into the Hall of Fame not for what they did in their home countries, but because of what they did in Japan. So Kenny Omega is a great option, right? You put him in the Hall of Fame because of all of his work in Japan. You didn't put Bob Sapp in the Hall of Fame due to all his work in Japan. He's not in the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. Why not? The Junkyard Dog is not in there either, because they focus on work rate, and then they decide that your work rate is not good enough. Oh, the Vince McMahon, his whole thing is he just picks who he likes. He puts Charmel into the Hall of Fame. Okay, you got the fucking Junkyard Dog, who was carrying an entire promotion on his back for years and years. He's not in your Hall of Fame. Bob Sapp, who was a top star in the promotion that you prefer, and you don't put him in the Hall of Fame. But they make sure to let you know that Dave Meltzer is not racist. Ian Douglas says this, and I quote, "This isn't to suggest that there's anything even remotely racist about Dave Meltzer's star rating system or the match rating systems of anyone else. What it does insinuate is that the side door through which some wrestlers have gained entry to the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame by participating in a series of matches that have been generally regarded as masterpieces on the face of their technical and artistic merits hasn't been open to black wrestlers. This is potentially owed to periods in wrestling history where black performers wrestled in styles that weren't conducive to displays of technical brilliance." Oh. So that's it. There's not enough technical brilliance in the black wrestlers. That's why they don't get into the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. That's why you can't. That's why Bob Sapp's not in there. All the money he drew, the fact that he's a huge celebrity, nope. He doesn't get to get put in their Hall of Fame. The Junkyard Dog, he's not in your Hall of Fame. No. Only the work rate guys. How many flips did you do in a match? How many moonsaults? It's ridiculous, bro. And if you want to use these excuses and then say that the WWE Hall of Fame is oh man, it's blown out of proportion, blah blah blah. This makes sense to you? You trying to tell me that black wrestlers don't have excellent athleticism? You trying to tell me that Kofi Kingston and Shelton Benjamin aren't fantastic athletes? That their matches aren't worth rating highly? Huh. Interesting. That's news to me. Too Cold Scorpio. He hasn't had any tremendous matches. I can think of one right off the top of my head. He had an absolute fantastic match with Chris Benoit. I believe it was, what was it, Super Brawl 92? And I don't remember anything, but I remember that match. I remember Too Cold Scorpio was a phenomenal athlete. He never got put into any wrestling Hall of Fames. Not to my knowledge. Interesting. Also missing from this list is TNA. There's no mention of TNA. There's no mention of Ring of Honor. No mention. Ring of Honor was around for almost 20 years before they went out of business, right? TNA, they've been around for 20 years. None of these guys get any flack for not having enough opportunities for blacks. But there's plenty of talk about how the WWE didn't offer enough black wrestlers opportunities. They go into an exhaustive list of not just how many black wrestlers appeared at WrestleMania, but black wrestlers specifically winning matches at WrestleMania. And then they dilute it even further to talk about black wrestlers pinning non-white wrestlers at WrestleMania. And then they go even further by defining blackness as wrestlers with two black parents. So now you went from, okay, blacks are not, they're artificially inflated in the WWE Hall of Fame because they use the legacy wing and they just pick random people like Coco Beware. And then you'll say, well, blacks have been featured into WrestleMania, but they're not allowed to actually beat white people. And then sometimes blacks are allowed to win, but they don't have two black parents. They're racially mixed. It's like, wait a minute. Wait a second. I like this article and everything, but I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, I'm Alice in Wonderland, and these are, I'm at the tea party right now. I'm like, okay, how did we get here? I'm following you. Wait a minute. How did we start defining blackness as two black parents? Now, they did a good job of discussing the lack of opportunities for black people. That's a legitimate discussion to have. He says here, quote, during the entirety of WWE's early Hulkamania era, stretching from 1985's WrestleMania to 1993, King of the Ring, fans were treated to just over 50 match appearances by full-time black wrestlers over the course of nearly 30 pay-per-view events. More than 40 of those appearances were logged by 5 men: the Junkyard Dog, Coco Beware, Butch Reed, Bad News Brown, and Virgil. It's figures like this that underscore why the WWE scrambled to find black wrestlers who have enough ring time in the spotlight to qualify for Hall of Fame candidacy. Okay, so this continues your logic of there's not enough black wrestlers being featured. So when you don't have enough black wrestlers being featured, you're not going to get people to believe that they're Hall of Fame worthy. I got you. Thumbs up. So then he starts talking about the depictions of black wrestlers. And I'm trying to figure out why we care about that each wrestler has two black parents. So he says, then there's the different matter of how black wrestlers are depicted. When you consider all of the match finishes that took place over the course of the first 20 WrestleManias, in a period of time stretching between 1985 and 2004, here's every match finish in which a black wrestler achieved a victory for either himself or a team by personally applying the pinfall or submission to an opponent. And it gives you a list. And he starts talking about the first 4 of these 9 black wrestling wins in 20 WrestleManias in perspective. The first victory on the list involves one black wrestler defeating another black wrestler. The second occurred in a dark match that never aired. The third was a professional football player in his match, which is the only match to date, and also the first time a black wrestler main evented WrestleMania in a singles match, which is Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bam Bigelow, for the record. The fourth involved a multiracial wrestler of half black, half Samoan, multi-generational wrestling royalty awarded a pinfall victory over a Samoan wrestler pretending to be of Arab descent. So basically, blacks don't get to pin black people. That's essentially it. Then we get to the racial definitions. Now, this is the important element, because this is about depictions, I think. Let's define an incontestably black wrestler as a wrestler with two black parents, which is fair given the premise that we typically define a white wrestler as possessing two white parents. Okay. I guess that's fair, but that would really dilute the number of black wrestlers. I guess that's the point, though, right? So then he says, because guys can't help, if their mama was white or something like that. I mean, it just can't be helped. If we apply this standard, the first time a black wrestler pinned or submitted a non-black wrestler during an official WrestleMania event to conclude a match is when Jazz secured a victory over Trish Stratus and Lita in a WWF Women's Championship match at WrestleMania 18. Jacqueline's victory over Ivory to open WrestleMania 15 was technically part of the Sunday Night Heat broadcast that was viewable on free television and preceded the WrestleMania 15 pay-per-view. He then continues, if you're wondering when the first time a full-blown black man meeting all of the same definitional requirements secured a pinfall win at WrestleMania, it was Shelton Benjamin winning a tag match for Team Angle at WrestleMania 19. Are you searching for the first time a fully black wrestler pinned or submitted a non-black wrestler straight up in a one-on-one match at WrestleMania? That took place at WrestleMania 29 when Mark Henry pinned Ryback. So we're getting to the granular elements of this. Like, nobody talks about how, some of these Hispanics might have white parents or something like that. Nobody cares about that shit. To me, when you get to the granular details of, we're talking about people's parents, we've overshot the hoop at this point. I think you did a really good job until we started talking about the parentage and the depictions of black wrestlers. You want to talk about black wrestlers not having enough opportunities? Thumbs up, I agree with you. There's not enough black wrestlers on the roster sometimes to even warrant this kind of thing, and it's unfortunate. But it's across the board, right? It should be a conversation which you can have about TNA as well, and about Ring of Honor, because they were around forever, and about other wrestling promotions that have been around for over 10 years, and they have not had a history of doing anything with black, talent. So while I appreciate the fervor for, wanting to make sure that black talents are appropriately showcased and platformed and given opportunities, I quite frankly don't give a damn if they pin other black wrestlers or pin non-white wrestlers, or I don't really care that much about that particular nugget of it. One of the things that really kind of drew my attention is that when you look at all of the black wrestlers who've been put into these various halls of fame, how they managed to create a standard in which there are black people who get in who are then not given any credit in the supposed mirror of spectator sports. I'll give you a good one. Thunderbolt Patterson. I just looked him up, just Googled him real quick. Thunderbolt Patterson is in the TNT Hall of Fame, the George Tragos Luthez Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. He is not in the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. Why is that? He's also not in the WWE Hall of Fame. So Thunderbolt Patterson was good enough for this very niche Hall of Fame that has only 2.5% black wrestlers. He was good enough for them. He's not good enough for the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. He's also wasn't honored by the Cauliflower Alley Club. Interesting. Why is that? Let's look at another one looked at random. Bearcat Wright. He's in the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, but that's the only one. He's in no other Wrestling Hall of Fame. Well, he's in the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2017. All right, so Wrestling Observer Newsletter and the WWE Hall of Fame. Is he not good enough for the TNT Hall of Fame or the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame or the Cauliflower Alley Club? I mean, what is this? If everybody is going to have their own individual standards, then there's going to be 100 different guys in these halls of fame. But when you look at a lot of it, there is some undeniable crossover. I mean, obviously guys like Hulk Hogan are pretty much going to be in everything. You know, a guy like Ric Flair is pretty much going to be in everything. But when you talk about black wrestlers, it seems like the only black wrestler who probably is in every single version of the Hall of Fame is going to end up being Bobo Brazil. So for comparison's sake, let's look at Bobo Brazil. All right, Bobo Brazil, Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, class of 1996. WWE Hall of Fame, class of 1994. He was in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame and Museum, class of 2008, what they call the television era. He is also in the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, class of 2023. He is also, no Cauliflower Alley Club induction from what I've seen. But he's in most of them, you know, which is great. But not everybody's Bobo Brazil, you know. So I liked the article. I think it was very interesting. It really had me thinking, made me think about some things. But I think that the everybody having their own standards kind of creates an interesting scenario where you have phenomenal black athletes who have done tremendous business not get honored because, you know, they don't like the style of match that they work. I hate to break it to you, but it's called the Hall of Fame. You should be famous for what your endeavor, you know. I know it. If you're just going to call it the Hall of Guys Who Matches We Really Like, then I can't debate you on that because you like these guys' matches. But if you call it a Hall of Fame and a guy carried a promotion for 5 or 6 years and he's not in your Hall of Fame, despite the fact that he was undoubtedly a huge draw, made tons of money, made more money than most of the people on your list, and you can't justify him not being, I'm talking about the Junkyard Dog, by the way, and he's not in your Hall of Fame, then don't call it a Hall of Fame. Call it a Hall of Old Dudes Who Matches We Really Liked. Just call it that. Because I can almost guarantee you didn't sit down and watch all these El Santo matches, though. I'm pretty sure you didn't. You're going to coast off his reputation. So you say, oh, El Santo, not really going to argue, throw him in there. Ricky Dozen, not going to really argue. Not going to sit here and watch all the Ricky Dozen matches to make this determination. You put him in the Hall of Fame. And I can almost guarantee you, none of these people who did all this voting sat down and watched an hour of Ricky Dozen matches. I would be surprised if they did. But they got him in the Hall of Fame for what he did for Japan. What El Santo did for Mexico. The Junkyard Dog, he's not Bobo Brazil, but he did that for that territory. And he's not in your Hall of Fame. And he went national and became a super popular star nationally. And he's not in your Hall of Fame. So my question is it a Hall of Fame or is it a Hall of Guys Who Matches We Actually Like? Because then you can justify putting pretty much anybody in there. I don't see how you can look at wrestling history and then say that you prefer certain promotions over the other. And then when there's a black guy at the top of that promotion or featured very heavily in that promotion, he is still left out, still not given any opportunities. But we got to talk about if you had 2 black parents and got to pin a white man at WrestleMania. Well, whatever. In any event, thank you guys for your time. Read the article for yourself. Tell me if you think I'm wrong in my analysis and my fervor. And I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace.